Good morning. Welcome to Coffee with the Pastor. Glad you could join me this morning. Good morning for coffee. We're in the last chapter of Acts. We're going to finish the book of Acts tomorrow, but we're in the last chapter, in chapter 28. And let me just kind of recap. Paul has been arrested in Jerusalem, really for no reason, just because the Jews don't like his message. He was put on trial before the Sanhedrin. They had a plot to kill him on the way to court one day, and it was discovered. So the Roman officials took him to Caesarea, where he stayed in jail for 2 years under Felix. Felix didn't find anything wrong with him, but he was pleasing the Jews to keep him in jail. Festus takes over, so Festus hears his case. Doesn't think that there's anything wrong, but the Jews want him to come back to Jerusalem. Paul sees that they're wanting to kill him if he goes back. So he appeals to Caesar, which a Roman citizen had a right to do. And so Festus is going to send him to Caesar. Before then, he has him stand trial again before King Agrippa so he can figure out what charges. They don't know what charges. And so he's been put on a ship to go to Rome. They got caught in a hurricane, literally. And now they have had a shipwreck, and they're in chapter 28. And understand that Luke lived this. Luke was with him on that ship. So when he describes all this, Luke is an eyewitness account and is recalling this when he writes this. So it's a good source. And in chapter 28, they have been shipwrecked, and they're on an island. And here we pick it up, chapter 28, verse 1. Once safely on shore, we found out that the island was called Malta. The islanders showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire and welcomed us all because it was raining and cold. Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as he put it in the fire, a viper, driven out by the heat, fastened itself on his hand. When the islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, they said to each other, "This man must be a murderer, for though he escaped from the sea, justice has not allowed him to live." But Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. The people expected him to swell up or suddenly fall dead, but after waiting a long time and seeing nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds and said he was a god. So Paul shipwrecked. First thing gets there, they build a fire, and then he has a viper, apparently a poisonous viper, the natives would have known, latch onto him, and he throws it in fire, and the natives all expect him to die, but he doesn't. And so they thought he was a god instead of just a man, which he'll straighten them out about that, I'm sure. There was an estate nearby that belonged to Publius, the chief official of the island. He welcomed us to his home, and for 3 days entertained us hospitably. His father was sick in bed, suffering from fever and dysentery. Paul went in to see him, and after prayer, placed his hands on him and healed him. When this had happened, the rest of the sick on the island came and were cured. They honored us in many ways, and when we were ready to sail, they furnished us with the supplies we needed. So the Apostle Paul goes, and the chief of the island invites him to his home, and he goes and he heals his father, and then everybody that was sick in the island came, and it sounded like that they were all healed. Malta, you can still visit Malta today. Obviously, there was some believers that were there that day, and my understanding is you can go to Malta. You can actually go to the cave where they think Paul stayed during the 3 months he was there, and it'd be a neat trip to go to someday. Verse 11 says, "After 3 months, we put out to sea in a ship that had wintered in the island. It was an Alexandrian ship with the figurehead of the twin gods Castor and Pollux. So I've hitched a ride on another ship. We put in at Syracuse and stayed there 3 days, and from there we set sail and arrived at Rhegium. Next day the south wind came up, and the following day we reached Puteoli. And there we found some brothers who invited us to spend a week with them, and so we came to Rome. The brothers there had heard that we were coming, and they traveled as far as the Forum of Appius and the 3 taverns to meet us. At the sight of these men, Paul thanked God and was encouraged. When we got to Rome, Paul was allowed to live by himself with a soldier to guard him. So God has told Paul he's going to get to Rome, and he's gotten to Rome. Now, he's under arrest, but he's gotten to Rome. People are hearing that he's got in Rome, and so they're coming to see him. And he's under house arrest. He's not in a Roman prison. He's under house arrest. Apparently, some of the believers must have furnished him a house. There is a Roman soldier with him at all times, but and we read from other places that Philippians and all that some of them are going to get saved while they're guarding him. Can you imagine being chained to Paul during the day, or being in the same house with Paul all day? You're going to hear about the gospel. But that's the one thing about Paul, is wherever he went, you were going to hear about the gospel. I mean, when he gets shipwrecked on Malta, he's healing people, ministering to people. He gets to Rome, he's under arrest, but he's ministering to people. And so that's where we have with Paul. Paul just constantly ministering, constantly doing things, constantly being used by God. A good example for us, because we need to be constantly doing that as well. Tomorrow we finish the book of Acts, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we finish this exciting book. It's a terrific book, given the history of the early church, and specifically more of Paul's ministry. So I'll see you tomorrow, and have a great day. Bye now.